The quiet countryside of the small town had always carried an air of calm, a place where time seemed to move slower and where neighbors trusted each other without question. That peace was broken on a chilly morning when an old farmer set out to plow his land, expecting nothing more than another routine day. His tractor jolted suddenly as it hit something hard beneath the soil. At first, he thought it was just a large stone, but as he climbed down and started to dig, he unearthed the edge of a wooden structure. The farmer's curiosity turned to unease when he realized it was not a single box, but several, lined up in a strange formation. He called for help, and soon police officers arrived, securing the area. What had been a simple farmland was now surrounded by flashing lights and yellow tape, with investigators moving cautiously through the dirt. As they dug deeper, 4 separate wooden boxes came into view, each buried at the same depth, carefully placed as if someone had wanted them to remain hidden forever. The crowd that gathered whispered nervously, unsure of what they were about to witness. When the boxes were finally lifted out of the earth, the weight of what was discovered settled heavily over the entire town. These were not ordinary boxes. They were crude coffins built hastily but deliberately, meant to contain something no one wanted to find. The realization that graves had been lying beneath the farmland for years sent shivers through everyone present. No one in the town could recall a time when 4 people had gone missing at once, which only deepened the mystery. What lay inside these strange coffins would soon unravel a secret that had been buried along with them, hidden in silence until this accidental discovery brought it to light. The removal of the coffins marked the beginning of a long and unsettling investigation. Forensic teams worked slowly, brushing away layers of dirt and carefully lifting each box to preserve whatever evidence might remain. When the lids were pried open, the investigators expected decay, but what they found shocked even the most experienced among them. Inside each coffin lay skeletal remains, fragile yet hauntingly intact. What disturbed the experts most was the striking similarity among the 4 bodies. They all appeared to be young, close in age, and their bones carried signs of healed fractures, suggesting they had endured hardships long before their deaths. These details painted a picture of lives marked by suffering, though the cause of death was still unclear. The town's records were examined in hopes of matching the remains to missing persons, but nothing seemed to fit. No reports of 4 individuals disappearing together had ever been filed, leaving investigators baffled. If no one had reported them missing, who were they? Were they strangers brought here in secret, or had they once belonged to the community but gone unnoticed? The thought unsettled the townspeople, who had always prided themselves on knowing every neighbor and every child by name. What added to the mystery was the way the graves had been prepared. They were shallow but carefully placed, as though the person who buried them had wanted the bodies concealed but not forgotten. The boxes were aligned in a straight row, not carelessly tossed into the earth. That detail hinted at intention, planning, and perhaps even ritual. Each new discovery pulled investigators further into a puzzle that grew darker with every passing day. One thing became clear: these graves were not random, and the victims shared a hidden connection that had yet to be uncovered. As investigators searched for leads, their attention turned to the history of the land where the graves were found. Old property records revealed that decades earlier, the farmland had belonged to an institution that few people in town spoke about anymore, an orphanage that had been shut down suddenly and quietly. The building, now abandoned and collapsing into ruin, had once housed dozens of children who had nowhere else to go. When detectives dug into its past, they uncovered troubling gaps in the records. Many of the children had no proper birth certificates, no family names, and in some cases, no trace beyond the orphanage walls. Older townsfolk, when questioned, recalled vague and unsettling rumors. Some remembered hearing about children who had vanished overnight, only for the orphanage staff to claim they had been adopted or moved elsewhere. Others spoke of strange noises and whispers that surrounded the place, but few dared to question what really happened inside. Over time, the whispers faded, and the building was left to rot, becoming nothing more than a dark memory in the town's history. The connection between the graves and the orphanage seemed impossible to ignore. The location matched, and the ages of the victims aligned with the stories of the missing children. But hard evidence was still lacking. No files from the orphanage explained where those children had gone, and the caretaker who once ran the institution had died years earlier, leaving behind no testimony. The silence of the records was almost as haunting as the graves themselves. For the investigators, the orphanage was no longer just a relic of the past. It was the key to unraveling the mystery. The abandoned halls might still carry the answers, hidden beneath dust, decay, and the weight of secrets long left to rot. The case grew darker when the medical examiner completed a closer study of the remains. At first glance, the skeletons appeared ordinary, but under stronger light and careful inspection, unsettling details began to emerge. Carved into the bones were deliberate markings, patterns too precise to be accidents of time or decay. These were not random scratches caused by soil or weather. They were etched with intent, deep grooves forming strange shapes that no one could immediately recognize. The idea that someone had returned to these bodies after death to leave behind these carvings filled the investigation with new horror. Experts were called in to examine the markings, and their conclusions only deepened the mystery. The carvings resembled symbols used in obscure rituals, practices that spoke of purification, sacrifice, or binding spirits. Though no one could confirm exactly what they meant, the patterns carried an undeniable sense of purpose. Whoever had created them had knowledge, patience, and a disturbing belief system. The discovery shifted the investigation away from the idea of a simple crime and into something far more sinister, a crime driven not only by violence, but by ideology. The revelation shocked the town. News spread quickly, and fear gripped the community in a way it never had before. These were no longer just forgotten graves. They were the remnants of acts carried out with a cold and chilling motive. People who had once dismissed the old orphanage stories now reconsidered them, wondering if those rumors of strange behavior and missing children had always carried a grain of truth. The graves were not hidden mistakes. They were part of a design, something someone had wanted to keep secret. The haunting question remained: who had done this, and why had the graves remained untouched for so long? Months of searching led investigators back to the ruins of the orphanage, where dust and decay covered every corner. Most of the rooms were empty, filled only with broken furniture and crumbling walls, but in a hidden compartment behind a collapsed shelf, they discovered something that would change the course of the case. Inside were several old journals, bound in worn leather and stained by age. The handwriting inside was shaky yet careful, belonging to the caretaker who had once run the orphanage. As the pages were turned, a grim story unfolded in his own words. The caretaker described his obsession with the idea of purifying lost souls. He believed the children under his care were chosen for a higher purpose, and his writings detailed how he selected those he thought were marked. He recorded his actions with chilling precision, describing the preparation of wooden boxes and the burial of the children in the very field where their graves had been found. The carvings on the bones were explained in his entries as part of rituals meant to release or cleanse the spirits, ensuring they would not wander the earth. The journals left no doubt that the caretaker had carried out the acts himself, hidden from the world for years. The townspeople were shaken as the truth emerged, realizing the man they had once trusted with vulnerable children had committed unthinkable crimes. Though justice could never be served, he had died long before, the victim's story was finally told. The field where the graves had been uncovered was later turned into a small memorial, marked by flowers and simple stones. It stood as a reminder of the lives lost and the haunting truth that secrets, no matter how deeply buried, eventually rise to the surface.